Happening now. We want to welcome our viewers from across the United States and around the world. This is the EdTech Situation Room. Good morning, good day, good evening. This is EdTech Situation Room episode number 173 for April 15th, 2020. My name is Jason Neiffer, and I am the Assistant Director and Curriculum Director of the Montana Digital Academy, the state virtual school located, well, I guess it is electronically located on the University of Montana campus in fabulous Missoula, Montana. I am, of course, working at home, and also working at home and joining me this evening, as always, good evening, Dr. Wesley Fryer. How are you doing, sir?
Good evening, Jason. I apologize to everybody for my tardiness. I had closed my eyes and was just thinking I would get a little shut eye, and then looked up and it was 10 after the hour. So I'm well and continuing to learn remotely here at the house, and excited that because of the crowd sourcing brainstorming that we did last week, I continue to dive into some options for virtual camera masks, or whatever we're going to call it, virtual backgrounds, I guess, not non-green screen background transparency, whatever. Coming to you with a lot of potential distraction today. That's what I'll say for that.
Well, this is not about virtual screens. This is actually a podcast about technology news, and we will tonight go through the nation's technology headlines and kind of shoot them through the prism of education. And as technology is a huge topic right now, as school districts across the United States and really around the world have evolved, side-volved, whatever you want to look at it as, to kind of remote teaching, an emergency version of distance learning. There's a lot of interesting information out there tonight about COVID-19, some pieces about technology evolution in the Microsoft and Google space. There's some new hardware out this week that I want to talk about a little bit. And then I pulled in a couple stories we didn't get to last week, including a topic that I know Wes is very passionate about, which is story chasing. So, Wes, I'll go ahead and let's go ahead and start with the COVID-19 news, because I think there's a couple interesting things here that are going on. The Verge reported on April 10th, and the story has been evolving and certainly taking on new tact in the last 5 days, that Apple and Google are working on a tracking system to be able to track those that are both found to have the coronavirus, even if, or I should say the novel coronavirus, and even after they're well again, or perhaps if they are diagnosed with it after being exposed to other people. They're trying to find a way to create a tracking system that both allows you to inform other people that might have been exposed to you, thus creating some kind of onus to quarantine, or maybe to more aggressively quarantine, but also track the movement of the disease over time. And there have been literally hundreds of articles about this in the last couple of days. And my understanding from it is that this is not, Apple or Google sending information to the government that's hooked to your Google or Apple accounts, but rather this is tracking low energy Bluetooth, which has been something that's been evolving actually quite dramatically in the last 4 or 5 years. Low energy Bluetooth is not the Bluetooth that you probably are thinking about, the Bluetooth that hooks up to your headphones or perhaps a peripheral that goes to your phone, but rather it is a standard that allows Bluetooth to talk to usually little antennas in locations. So, for example, chances are if you've recently gone into a major department store, there's probably been small little low energy Bluetooth antennas that's intended to track people's area around, for example, a department store. And while that can sound a little, next generation 1984 tracking, the intention is to provide the opportunity for people in various spaces to do things like track the movement of people, or look where people are congregated at, or be able to track people over time for purposes of crowd control traffic, or all sorts of kind of data uses. And so I guess I'll start with Wes. Have you installed any of the tracking apps? I know the one that is not App or Google based, but the one that I've been utilizing because I think it's important to try to share data here. How We Feel is one of the apps. It's not one of the Google or Apple apps, but it's an app that's intended to track people and how they're feeling at home without, this one is supposed to be piracy focused, so there's no privacy focus, so there's not a lot of low energy Bluetooth tracking, but asks you on a daily basis how you feel in order to try to track maybe unofficial COVID numbers. But Where are you at on your comfortability of maybe the major players in cell phones going ahead and tracking low energy Bluetooth to try to find some tracking mechanisms for this pandemic?
Well, I actually, I'm limiting the number of times I'm turning on the news each day. I'm using my Google Home to usually get that news. And I think it was an NPR article that I had just listened to about this tonight that was saying, smartphones are going to be playing an important role in the firing up of the economy and to some level the tracking of people in terms of who has been certified, bona fide, whatever, that hey, either you've had COVID-19 or you've had testing that basically says you are safe to return. So I have not installed any apps like this. I am very curious to track this because we've talked on the show and had some other articles about civil liberties and what's going on in China. We've mentioned Israel. There's other nations, right, that are trying to utilize more than just the meta information, but really do a deeper dive into the privacy data that we're giving up by using our cell phones. And so I have not. Have you downloaded anything, Jason? And are you?
Yeah, I am.
Significant investment in perhaps a Silicon Valley startup that's going to be playing a role in the weeks to come with this.
No, I have not invested in any startups related to this, but I am curious about, and I do think that data, especially when I give some choice on data, or whether to share the data, I think is really interesting. And so I have been utilizing, and I've reported 6 days in a row on the How We Feel app in an attempt to start providing some data sets that are maybe a little more user controlled. But, I think the thing that we need to be, at least aware of is that part of what is going to allow us to track the COVID-19 outbreak and maybe exert some control over the pandemic is to understand how it spreads. And I'm certainly not an advocate for, endlessly sharing of personal data with even well-meaning third parties. But I do think there is something to the fact that we have an unprecedented ability to take perhaps anonymized data and provide an opportunity to track the virus over time in an attempt to do something about, where people are going, how they're moving. I know that we talked about 2 weeks ago that Google had been sharing some data sets about various localities. I think they were doing it by county to see who was really staying at home and who was moving around more. Missoula, the county I live in western Montana, happened to be one of the more aggressively moving counties, which meant we ranked lower on the stay-at-home index, although we have had relatively few cases in western Montana. But I do think it's an interesting that at least they're experimenting with this. And also, there obviously has been some privacy advocates that have expressed concern about this, but there have been others that are privacy-minded that said there's ways to do this that doesn't sacrifice personal privacy. So I'm hoping that good I hope that good stewardship continues as part of this discussion as we talk about how data plays into the fighting of COVID-19. Okay, so 2 other articles. One's from, they're both from last week, although only one of them we had missed last week. The other one is a little newer. There's a great article in the April 6th edition of the New York Times. It's titled, "As Schools Move Online, Many Students Stay Logged Out." And I've seen at least a dozen mentions of this in the national news media, that although many school districts have adopted remote learning policies, everything from formal distance learning platforms to something that's a little more informal, whether it's with Chromebooks or traditional paper packets, a variety of strategies going on across the United States and really around the world. The New York Times reports that a lot of school districts say that they're not able to connect with many of their students. And in fact, even when they are, some students are deciding for whatever reason to not log in or not engage in the distance learning programs that are available. And I wanted to strike this conversation with you, Wes, knowing that you've played a very important role in your institution in helping teachers move to remote teaching. I, of course, work for the state virtual school in Montana, and certainly many of our students have engaged with us since school closure started the 3rd week of March in Montana, although some of our students have ultimately disappeared. And I think there's a discussion here that probably needs to happen after the pandemic is over with of, is it the strategies that kept some students away? Is it access? Is it opportunity? But obviously this New York Times article calls into question some strategies, particularly digital ones, although really across the board, of what happens when school can't be in the physical school. So I'd start off with, Wes, what's been your experience as a teacher and an administrator right now with dealing with students that have disengaged?
Well, this is fascinating. I would say, first off, we don't know how long this thing is going to go on.
Yeah.
And I really personally think, I'm not speaking for my school here, I'm speaking just as Wes Fryer. Can I do that? I can. That we need to be playing a long game, because it's going to take a while to get a vaccine out there, and no one that is in a position of authority today is being able to conclusively say, this is the date. Well, let me say this. No one credible is saying, I can give you a date that, we're going to for sure be able to activate and have everyone go back, et cetera. So we've talked, and you mentioned on the show, Jason, and I agree that we need to be careful not spending so much time really focusing on, not necessarily name calling, but just sort of the blaming and things like that. We need to get through this. We need to take the steps that are necessary to be able to meet needs and move forward. But at the same time, we talk about not squandering a good crisis. I mean, we have huge equity issues in this country, and we need to be addressing them now. This is something that we're not going to want to just, say, hey, in another generation or in 10 years or something like that. We really need to be addressing these issues. So in terms of kids that are not engaging, one of the things I've heard some leaders talk about it is in terms of the opportunity. Everybody's in a different situation, not only with respect to their technology access, what kind of devices they have, what their high-speed internet at home is, but also just in terms of life and everything that's going on. So I think it's important that school officials, teachers are doing their best to provide an opportunity today for students to engage in remote learning. And we've talked about this on the show, why that's really important. We're not doing online learning. We're not doing distance learning. This is remote learning. This is different. And therefore, the strategies and the things that we're doing, and hopefully also, hopefully we can always have kindness and grace in our heart for others, but, we really need a strong dose of that, because it is an unprecedented pandemic that we're all facing, that teachers are facing as well. So I think that we need to be reaching out to individual students and families. I think that we need to remember, old school technologies like the phone, along with new school technologies like video conferencing and things like that. I think that we're going to need to step up as states and as communities to the need that we have for connectivity. That's a huge one, right? In terms of, can I get online? Do I have a viable, Wi-Fi or cable modem wired connection option? Those kinds of things can't, in this case, just be left to the marketplace. Interestingly, and we have, I don't know if she's still sticking around, but one of my friends from my AT&T days who, saw us on Facebook tonight and has jumped into the live stream. When I worked for AT&T for 2 years, I had really interesting conversations with some officials who talked about return on investment and why AT&T at that time was not really fired up about community Wi-Fi, and why the return on investment, in a college town or anytime you had a situation where the population density was at a certain level, yes, that was, there was going to be return on investment. But when you took a look at, very rural areas and, areas that had very low population, there's not an economic incentive for the internet service providers to be stepping up and providing things. So we need to draw lessons from the days of connecting rural America to electrification, to phone lines. Government regulation played a really important role there. Co-ops played an important role. And, we saw that it was not an option to bring electricity to everybody's house, and it wasn't an option to bring a phone line to everybody's house. Similarly, bringing high-speed internet connectivity, and we've talked, I think, on the show before too, like, that's interesting. Does that mean 25 megabits per second down? Ooh, we're right now on the next to top tier for Cox cable, which in our community means 300 megabytes down, 30 megabits up. That's meeting our needs pretty well as having 4 remote learners. But I would just say, this is a very long-winded answer, we have got to step up as communities, and we're going to need to be stepping up as taxpayers and citizens, because we can't have, and this is just, again, my view, a laissez-faire approach that says, hey, yeah, the market will just take care of it. We're just going to, let the AT&Ts and the Verizons and the Comcasts and all that see if it suits their fancy, and if they want to connect people, they can. No, that's not what we're going to need. We're going to actually need a regulatory situation where we're going to have to bring high-speed internet to folks so that they have the opportunity to fully participate in the 21st century. You've got to have a digital device, and you're going to have connectivity. Both of those things are required.
Yep, absolutely. And I would also note, too, that a bit from my background as well, and again, speaking for myself and not for my institution, that, distance learning and remote teaching and all the span of the spectrums here, some students really do need more direct face-to-face engagement to engage with difficult learning tasks. And the other article I want to talk about tonight is one from last week as well. There's an interesting USA Today article about the use of apps to teach world languages, right? And the question is, well, is this the primary moment for apps to step in and replace teachers? And I run a distance learning organization that prioritizes putting teachers with students in order to make learning productive, interesting, and engaging, right? And the internet has always been a broad promise of being a massive opportunity for people to teach themselves stuff. But remember, if it was good enough to use YouTube and apps and videos, we'd be able to hand an iPad to an infant or a young child and have them just take care of this on their own. That doesn't diminish the fact that lots of people can teach themselves some really interesting stuff utilizing the extraordinary amount of resources available to them. And I've personally heard a lot of interesting stories of parents that have been underwhelmed by their district's response to this. And again, I wouldn't criticize districts here. This has been an extraordinary amount of very fast evolution with very little time, and in a lot of cases, very little resources to do so. But they felt as if that they weren't getting a full day's engagement out of their district strategy. And so they've had their students engage in passion projects, right? Research something yourself, create something yourself, do something yourself. I do not doubt, and in fact, I would agree with, that that's an extraordinary way to create a kind of a culture of learning in your household. But that doesn't diminish the fact that most students would prefer a social environment. Most students would prefer to see and be with teachers face to face. Most students would prefer to learn in a well-implemented classroom environment as opposed to from an app. And so, this is not the time to declare the end of education and teachers and, what we know already works by both research and practice. The notion here is that we are in an emergency situation. I have a sticky note that is on my monitor that I refer to constantly, and I would show it close to the camera, but it disappears with my little app background. I keep reminding myself that this is a pandemic, right? We are in an emergency situation. It is not at all an exaggeration to say that we have not seen anything like this in the modern era of schooling. So let's give ourselves a break for now, and let's also not declare this an opportunity to get rid of some of the things we hold so dear in education, like the student-teacher relationship, like formal and informal learning environments that involve teaching and teachers. And I think that's an important part of us responding to and evolving through this process.
And I'm really curious, and love the chat that we've got going on in the chat room. Want to definitely let people know, whether you're viewing us on YouTube Live or on Facebook Live, you can go ahead and put a comment in. We can see that we've got 5 live viewers, but until you put a comment in, we don't know who it is. So definitely add a shout out of hi, or if you want to ask a question or anything like that. I would be very curious to know how many school districts right now are under pressure to basically cater to the lowest common denominator, which is not being connected, not having a device, not having connectivity. I would say that's not what we should be trying. That's an equity issue, but we shouldn't be letting that define the ceiling of what we're doing for students. You know, we just rolled out this week a new schedule for our students, particularly in middle school. So I actually had my first live class with my 5th and 6th grade computer students. Our schedule, which I can link in the show notes, because we're having all of our COVID-19 response stuff, you know, on our public side of our website for our school, which I think is great. Our new schedule emphasizes more live teaching. I had not had a chance to have any live classes because I'm an elective teacher. I normally would see my kids face to face every other day. And in the new schedule, I see them once every 6 days, and I teach 4 out of the 6 days. But the kids are, you know, I think it's at least 4 face-to-face classes that they're online with. It's quite a bit. And so there's assumptions that are being made about how much connectivity and bandwidth students have, and, you know, how that mix of asynchronous and synchronous should happen. So I guess I want to tell people that, yes, I agree with you, Jason. We are in an extraordinary pandemic, and we need to be very forgiving, and we need to, you know, open up our hearts to everybody who's involved in this, you know, students and teachers, you know, administrators, parents, everyone. But we also need to be keeping an eye on what the best practice is, and also
Agreed.
kind of basically not going to one extreme or the other. Let's not assume everyone has plenty of high-speed connectivity for every learner in their house to be online at the same time with their own device, because that's not accurate. And similarly, let's not go to the opposite extreme of saying, oh, wait a minute, some of our kids don't have connectivity. We better just stick with packets and not do anything online at all. I think we're going to need to strike a balance there. So, hey, and speaking of striking a balance, I hope I have not exited the internet here, because Jason has just tapped out. So I will keep talking in the hope that I am not alone in the live stream. And what I am doing, and I have not done this yet today, is I go to, there he is, he's back. I go to my Wi-Fi here, and I was hoping I was not alone, Jason, and I prioritized, speaking of connectivity, I was hoping that I hadn't drop my connection. We have the Google Wi-Fi, which is now Nest Wi-Fi at our house, and usually before I'll show, I'll prioritize myself that I'm hopefully not kicked off. So, are we being a little bit too adamant and passionate on these topics tonight, Dr. Neiffer?
No, I mean, and I think we do owe it. I mean, there's going to have to be a long conversation about hundreds of issues in education after this is over with. We can start some of them now. For example, the connectivity issue couldn't be more important. And I'm particularly sensitive to this because I feel like there's been a lot of lip service with, you know, large telecoms on, in some cases, accepting money in places like rural Montana, and it's just not as connected as it needs to be or should be. And I am very sensitive to that topic because I do think that internet connectivity should be like a utility at this point, right? We should treat it as everyone in a reasonable location should be able to get, I would argue, at least 2 different types of internet relatively inexpensively. I would put my own tax dollars towards that. I think it's important enough in 2020 to have those pieces. I also think too that, you know, some of the districts that scramble to do something about this, it's not just a question of connectivity. It's also a question of things like teacher professional development. It's a question of how do we best help our teachers, help our students in blended learning environments that in a lot of cases have been ignored in some districts and regions. And so, yeah, it is such a multifaceted conversation. And, you know, at the same time, you know, ignoring the learning component of this, the fact that schools are relied upon for so many social services beyond the learning component itself. I know that a lot of school districts, thousands of them across the United States, have worked extraordinarily hard to get meals delivered to kids because school is a lifeline to provide nutrition for so many students in the United States. That's a conversation we need to have as well, but it's multifaceted, and I think we should reflect a lot on this. Of course, let's keep our eye on the ball. We've got an amazing amount of interesting things that are going on right now that are worthy of our discussion and our collegiate conversation and debate and posture. But at some point, too, we're going to have to go in and maybe reprioritize a little bit and consider where we're going, where we've been, and what the future looks like.
Very good. Well, we are going to visit about some other topics here in addition to that. But I mean, each week for the last several weeks, I think the COVID-19 impact on education has probably been one of the most important things that we've been addressing. So we're not going to give that one up. But I would like to go ahead and take us to a security article, which you, sir, put in. And there's a segue here because the more we're doing online, the more important it is to talk about being safe and how we need to make sure we are protecting ourselves, our families, our communities, yada, yada, yada. You had shared an excellent article, perhaps yesterday, that was from the Android Authority. That was called One Password versus LastPass. What's the best password manager? And basically, the article says you can't go wrong with either one. They're both fantastic, and they've got, different features, but a lot of similarities. In the course of that sharing, we also had, I think, Ryan Collins, one of my friends from Ohio that I met years ago. It's one of those connections where I made it. I don't know if I had made a connection with him online, probably via Twitter, or actually this is via blogs, maybe even before Twitter. But anyway, I got to see him for their conference. In fact, he was one of the people I went to their state conference and had asked the organizers, "Hey, if I can just see one breakout session, who should I see?" And they're like, "You go see Ryan Collins." So he's that guy. But anyway, he had recommended an open source password manager that I'd never heard of before that is called Bitwarden. And so we tweeted out to them, and it is saying, solve your password problems the easiest and safest way for individual teams and businesses to store, share, and sync sensitive data. So, Dr. Neiffer, where are you today on the password manager conversation, as you have that with not only colleagues at work, but perhaps members of your own family? And then as you all are talking to students, what kinds of things are you all telling them?
Well, I'm a LastPass guy. I have been for a long time, and I think it was on this podcast probably about a year ago. We started talking about my slow evolution towards getting a unique password for every single website, and I will tell you, it's a randomly generated password for every website, 20 characters or more. I get made fun of sometimes. I do have a handful of projects where I have to share a username and password, and when I create it, I send them a username and a long password, and I get made fun of, but I tell them if it's 10 randomly generated characters, you're not going to memorize that anyway, so it might as well be 25 randomly generated characters, right? But I am all in on OnePass, and it's what I encourage my friends and family to do. I also encourage my colleagues. I'm sorry, you're right. LastPass is my preferred one there, and my wife uses it, my family uses it. It's something that I think is really important to do. I think, and the reason why I like this article is that it basically said that as long as you're using a good password manager, you're probably, just comparing apples and slightly sweeter apples as opposed to, good and bad. There are some password managers that I have seen articles on before to say they were clunky or not useful. I had never heard of this Bitwarden software, although I did read through the site and it looked interesting because of its open source nature. But I couldn't stress enough, you're probably creating new accounts right now. If it's not for school, it's for home. Whether it's a streaming service or it's something that you're using for the first time, it's worth your time to create a unique username and password for every website that you use, just so to get that extra layer of security. You can't memorize all those, so use a password manager.
And I probably need a better place for all these, but currently I have a series of webinars, one of which is protecting yourself and your family online. That's at designcreateshare.com /something. You can just click, I think, videos at the top or webinars or something. But yeah, it's critical. And it's one of those things that, early adopters, like so many different things with technology, we're doing first, and it's becoming more and more mainstream. And just as we talked, quite a bit in the last two shows about Zoom jacking and the ways in which, folks are using programs from the dark web to be able to jump into conferences and the ways in which some folks, to include members of my extended family, who apparently I learned today, their church posted a link to their Zoom recently, and led to Zoom jacking. People have got to take security seriously, and we can't just brush this off. So these are conversations for everyone, not just for the geeks in your house or in your circle of friends. And we need to just continue to help people understand how they can be safe online, and that's a critical piece of that puzzle. What else?
Absolutely. The other security article that I want to share is something that's actually a couple months old, but I saw it kind of circulating around with a couple different professional groups I follow. This is from the CBC on January 28th, 2020. Why taking Facebook quizzes is a really bad idea. And I noticed that this was retweeted by a couple of, I guess, maybe influencers, I guess. So I think this did strike a chord, but something that people are coming back onto Facebook. I kind of have the counter tech correction argument I want to make a little bit later in the show tonight to talk about how maybe we're having a correction to the tech correction as we reconsider where we're going with technology. I think it's proved to be extremely useful, not just because K through higher ed education needed to move to technology to be able to stay connected for the rest of the school year, but also because we're connecting with our families and friends and news in that way. But this article talks in some detail about the risk of utilizing free Facebook quizzes, and whether it's what character from Mad Men are you, or what historical figure are you closest to. Whenever you are giving access to a quiz that can anyway access information about you, and it's been a while since I've taken any of those sort of Facebook quizzes, but those quizzes oftentimes will ask for at least your basic user information. It will say, I'm accessing your name and your basic profile information. The argument here from security experts is that you are actually perhaps contributing to a database that could be anything from things marketed towards you to people actually seeking to steal your identity and find out more about you to engage in directed cyber attacks against you. And I'm sure that many of these are probably in good, clean fun, but the free quizzes that are offered on social media oftentimes aren't really free. You're really paying not only with your personal data, but perhaps even with your privacy. So be careful out there, right? I know you're bored, right? I'm certainly getting bored. And at some point, rewatching 90s television, I'm in season 2 of ER, which I have no idea why I'm watching it, but it seemed to be comforting to me to watch some older television from my youth. But, don't board your way into a security problem.
Hey, go out and watch and put it on your watch list if you haven't already. The Great Hack on Netflix, if you've got access to Netflix. It's a 2019 documentary, and it's all about Cambridge Analytica. And, sometimes these very innocuous sounding, oh, are you a Gryffindor or would you be Ravenclaw, kinds of quizzes actually contributed to some significant disruption in the electoral process, both in Great Britain and the United States. And it's a real eye-opener to see how these things like take a little quiz, have led to incredible breaches of data and compromises. And again, here in the United States, as well as globally to a degree, although Europe is leading us with GDPR, we're just hoping and expecting the tech companies to clean up their act and be able to protect us and not, allow these kinds of nefarious and dangerous things to happen. And some things have changed since, pre-November 2016, but a lot of things are the same. And user behavior, this is it, the vector of how the bad guys are getting at information. It generally has to do with whether or not you're clicking links and the kinds of practices that you and I have with our passwords and the level of trust really that we have when it comes to clicking things and sharing things. So more important than ever, we've got more people than ever before who are handling their commerce online. We've learned. I went ahead and paid I think $100 a year to get our Walmart Supercenter to deliver for free. And so what we've realized is you got to save your spot. So I just tonight at dinner, somebody mentioned, hey, I need some shampoo. I was like, well, okay, let's open up our order. So we got our delivery scheduled for Friday, and you have to have at least $30, but you can always add to it. Anyway, we weren't doing that level of online shopping a month 2 months ago that we are today. And so that volume of digital traffic is going to mean there's even more folks trying to get access to our information, our data, and sometimes it can come from quizzes. So that is a fantastic article, and I'm really glad that you shared it. So
well, let's talk about maybe some platform news. Interesting things going on in the Google architecture and in the Facebook architecture. Last week we talked about Zoom and some of the nationwide panic over Zoom, and that story continues. The one thing I would say that is very exciting is that all these platforms that are suddenly being relied upon for remote working, remote teaching, connecting with family and friends, they're evolving very quickly and rolling out new features at a really unprecedented rate. Let's talk about the Google stuff here quickly. A great article from The Verge on April 13th for the Chrome OS faithful, which happens to include me. Google is starting to prefer installation of progressive web apps, or PWAs, over Android apps when they have an opportunity to do so. And I would say that this is a great evolution, especially on Chrome OS. I'm a Chrome OS guy. I utilize Chrome OS a good percentage of the time, especially laptop-wise. I'm currently using a Windows desktop at home because I've needed some access to some applications that need the full desktop. But even at work and when I carry a laptop, it's always Chrome OS. And I prefer the progressive web apps, generally speaking, because they're fast, they don't take up any space, and they're usually quite functional. And so it's interesting to see kind of Google go in this direction. And something that I can tell you from my own experience, that you can really save almost any web page as an app on Chrome OS. There's a command to do so. You can even put it in a window. An example of an app I use at work all the time is that there's a couple of emoji directories that sometimes when I want to use a creative emoji, when I'm chatting with coworkers online, I've installed it as an app on Chrome OS, and it's just in my taskbar. I can click on it, put it in a small window, and search for interesting emojis to share. So that's an interesting evolution there. And then the one I really want to talk about tonight, because I really do think this could make a real big difference in productivity. The Laptop Magazine reported on April 12th that Chrome version 81, so this would be the operating system and the browser, is releasing a new feature set that has not appeared on mine yet, although I have not looked that closely, but I am using it on the mobile version of the browser. It's called tab groups, and basically what it allows you to do is to take groups of tabs, move them together, and label them as one, so you can hyper organize if you are a multiple tab person. And I will say that especially when I have a lot of things going on, I could sometimes have 25, 30, 40, I don't even want to say what my record is of tabs that are open, but even if you are kind of a ninja with having different windows available, and you have all of the keyboard commands, or you have kind of Jedi moves with trackpad, it's useful to put things together and kind of put them in little groups. And I've used this on the Android phone. Chrome on the Android phone already does this, but it's coming to desktop. And so that Laptop Magazine article goes into how you utilize them and how you can put tabs into groups and what that does for you. So first, I got to say, Wes, are you a mass tab opener as a general user?
Well, I certainly can't be on my phone. In fact, again, tonight at dinner, I looked at this, and I think we've shared this on the show before, but on your iPhone, you can hold down on the tab, I don't know what that button is, the tab windows in the corner, and then you can choose to close them all. And I had like 46. But, Safari on iOS is getting better about memory management. tab suspender or the great suspender or some Chrome, extension like that is going to be important for you if you have a lot of extensions. And we're helping teachers as well as students and maybe not as much parents become aware of this when we're connecting and saying, well, you've got so many tabs open. Did you know the more tabs you have open, the more memory your browser is taking, and that'll really speed up your experience to not have so many. So I do not think I am a tab binger, but it is really interesting to see, these kinds of tools to help us restore. Sometimes I've seen teachers really kind of panic when I'm like, let's go ahead and close these tabs. And they're like, oh my gosh, and yes, that's a great thing about the Chrome browser. You can go back to your history, go back to, where you've had things saved. So I am not probably over tabbing, as it were, but it is something to be aware of. And it's also, frankly, something to look at your browser and your memory consumption. It's incredible to see how much memory and processor load that Chrome can take on machines now. We're seeing that a lot with video conferencing, as far as, Google Hangout Meets is great, but can put a lot of demands on us.
Yep.
Peggy says she just closed 52 tabs before our show. This is going to be, what do we call that when it's like, we meet and say, yes, I'm a tabaholic, and I just closed. So we'll confess our tab sins to each other, and then promise to do better next time.
Well, I know if you've ever seen this, Wes, and I'm not sure if I can even show you this or not on the phone. I don't think I can with my little backgrounder on, but I have so many tabs open on Chrome on my phone that it doesn't show a number anymore. It just has a smiley face. So I think Chrome knows that I tend to be a bit of an over-tabber. And a shout out to my good friend and coworker, Mike Augustinelli, who at any given time, hundreds probably, and sometimes has to restart every couple of weeks, closed everything down to do it, just to give him the freedom of getting rid of some of those tabs. But he's a big tab guy as well. Also does use the great suspender, though, the plugin that allows you to kind of have that stop sucking up your memory. So
yeah. And in our chat, Peggy's giving a shout out to OneTab, and she's using that as a feature that she likes, rather than organizing folders and groups and things like that.
And then one last story I wanted to focus on, just because it's timely. If you're in a Google district and you're using Google Meet, and Google Meet is the video conferencing platform available on Google Apps for Education, great, stable, simple, easy to use platform, but it does lack one feature that Zoom happens to have a bit of a market on, which is what I like to call the Brady Bunch view. Like, you can put as many people as are in the meeting on a single screen. I've had up to 16 show at once. It's a great feature, but Google Meet doesn't have that. It will show you 4 or 5 people in I believe it's the upper right-hand corner plus whoever's speaking. But there is a wonderful, absolutely wonderful plugin, a Chrome plugin that you can utilize. It is a third-party plugin. It's not from Google, but it's got strong reviews, and it's advertised as an accessibility plugin that gives you grid view on Google Meet. You install it, it adds a button to the upper right-hand corner, and then you too can get Brady Bunch view on Google Meet. And I was in a Google Meet on Monday in a meeting with folks that work together at the University of Montana for the Moodle LMS that we utilize across our campuses, and I was a little sad because I couldn't see everyone's smiling faces, and I pressed the button and suddenly all 15 people in the meeting, all their cameras showed. So if you've been missing that in Google Meet, that Chrome extension will be in our show notes at techsr.com.
Yes, and we have been using that for the last couple of weeks at our school. I'll say, as a teacher, it's hugely important to be able to see all of your students, for them to be able to raise their hands. And the more, if you've got it can just be one person with a microphone problem that can make things really painful. But, being able to have students with muted mics, but still being able to raise hands and give you thumbs up and being able to see them all, it's instructionally really important. However, I would say there are still some important missing pieces for Google Hangout Meets. If you don't follow Eric Kurtz, I think we've done shout outs to Eric before on the show. He's got some phenomenally wonderful tutorials about a variety of Google tools to include Hangout Meets. They just made some very good changes where in your Google Classroom, you can activate in the settings a Hangout Meet for that class. And what that unique link allows you to do is not have students join it early. So when you simply generate a Hangout Meets link from a calendar invitation, for instance, or from a calendar event in Google, that is basically a live link that anybody can join at any time. And so our school, I think, like many others, has set up the access to Hangout Meets this is for our elementary and our middle schoolers. So actually they get to join Hangout Meets, but they can't create them themselves. And so it is an important thing as far as whether or not there's these links out there that are just like, hey, we can hang out here anytime. So that is something new that Google has added. When you create that Hangout Meets link within Google Classroom, your students have to be a part of your Google Classroom in order to join the link. They can't join it until you start it as a teacher. And then as long as you make sure the students leave before you quit, they also can't, rejoin that. So it makes it where it's not a persistent link. But there is some other important things that Google is not doing. To their credit, security. We've talked about Zoom jacking a lot. I think last show I've started to name our shows. It's been a best practice here for a while that podcasts are not supposed to just say I'm episode. Like tonight we're 173, I think. But you're supposed to have some like little clever name. And so I think I put something in there about Zoom jacking. But you have to be a member of your organizational domain, your school domain, in order to just join the Hangout Meet video conference. If there's an outsider who's joining, then you have to approve them to join as an organizer. And that's part of the missing thing that we saw with Zoom early on was, people would throw these links out there, there were passwords, and, anybody could join. But there's not a mute all button. And that's really important. And so we are utilizing some GoToMeeting video conferencing as well as Hangout Meets at our school. And one of the great things about that is being able to have that button that just with one tap, lets you mute everybody who's there except for yourself. And, when you've got, for instance, a room full of first graders, as we have now, that are meeting virtually every day, and it's not just first graders, it's other ages too. That becomes really important. But shout out to Eric Kurtz, shout out to Google, continuing to make the tools better, continuing to educate all of us about the tools. And I am, continuing to be so thankful that we're part of the Google domain because that is a huge collaborative and potential that we have been realizing as a school. But now that we're in remote learning, it's even more important, and we're leaning in even more to the power of Google.
Excellent.
What about that VPN article, Jason? Would you mind doing that one from Tom's Guide?
Sure. So Tom's Guide reported, I believe it was over the weekend, that a particular VPN app threatens 100 million users, and they encourage you to delete it now. It's called the Super VPN app. I've never installed this app myself, but it is one of the many free VPNs that are available. And according to many security experts, that this particular free VPN client is amazingly dangerous. That's what the article cites. That it leaks information, it tracks you, it does all sorts of nastiness, and in some cases doesn't even provide you the typical security that a VPN gives you. And I encourage you to read the article, but I would state one more time for the record, do not use free VPN services. And the reason why I mention this, like, you shouldn't do this, but this is a conversation you should be having with students, because free VPNs are extremely popular among students in an attempt to get around content filtering in school districts that have open Wi-Fi but substantially locked down. And sometimes a VPN can get around it, and sometimes it can't. But the reason why I mention this is because there's been all sorts of articles really for years that most of the free VPN services that exist really only exist to steal data from you or track you in a way that they can monetize. And I'm a VPN user. I use a VPN whenever I am in public Wi-Fi, but I use either the University of Montana VPN because they provide me VPN access. So when I'm on school business, I always connect to the University of Montana VPN whenever I'm on any sort of questionable Wi-Fi, whether I'm in a hotel or at a Starbucks or a library at another institution. I want to be able to get back to my home internet through that pipe. But also do your research to find VPN apps that are secure. For example, I use PIA, Private Internet Access, which has a pay for. They don't have a free tier. The pay for tier I pay for, I think it's $35 a year for unlimited access to be able to tunnel through that. I've mentioned Outline before, which is Google's open source VPN. You can pay $5 a month, set up your own server for that, and it works super well. The point is that don't use free VPN apps. And if you work with students and you help them with tech issues, tell them not to use free VPN apps themselves.
Let's hit at least one Apple article, and I'll do a shout out to Jeremy King, who shared this one with me. I had not heard about Apple and their new developments as far as hardware. This is from Mac Rumors today, April 15th. New Magic Keyboard for iPad Pro available to order, and deliveries begin next week. And so we've got some new hardware. Actually, Apple has rolled out some new iPads, and man, this thing, it looks very desktop-like. So it actually has it looks like a MacBook Pro or a MacBook Air. It's just a hard, firm keyboard that has a trackpad at the base, and then it's got what looks like a very rigid, holder, for your iPad Pro. So wow, pretty cool. We're in the midst of conversations we were already about one-to-one, and what's amazing is we've been optional BYOD at our high school, and we've been cart-based really everywhere else, as far as like iPads, mainly in lower school or elementary school, with also some iPads, and then Chromebook carts. And so anyway, we've been looking at a year and a half from now going one-to-one. Well, what just happened with remote learning is, in the span of 3 weeks, we went one-to-one BYOD, everybody, pre-K through 12th grade. And so we are having some teachers utilize some iPads and talking about platforms and things like that. And certainly in the hands of our teachers, it's been critical for math, especially, to have a stylus. I just actually ran a computer over to a teacher yesterday morning who was having trouble, and one of the things she needed to do was connect her iPad to be able to teach math. And so exciting to see this from Apple. Jason, are you at all moving any more temptation wise towards the Apple Watch, towards the Apple universe? You were on a Windows box last week, right? What are you? I think you might be starting one tonight, because would this background perhaps mean that you're not on Chrome tonight?
Yeah, I'm still in my Windows box right now, and part of it, the reason why I did get a Windows desktop back rolling in my house, is because I've been playing more computer games. So as part of the distraction when I'm at home, I will say the other article I put in with Apple hardware is that Apple introduced the iPhone SE2 today, which is their low cost phone, $399 for the 64 gigabyte model. It's got a faster chip. It's roughly equivalent to the iPhone 8 from a hardware standpoint, but it's got a much faster chip in it. And my understanding, it's a pretty nice piece of hardware. Again, the only thing that really tempts me here is the Apple Watch, right? I like the hardware, and the hardware's okay, but I prefer Android stuff. And I really like Chrome OS. I mean, I'm really, other than when I'm trying to play, old 1990s IBM games, no, Windows games. What I'm trying to do is I usually stay on the Chrome OS platform, but the Apple Watch is just so darn tempting because of the health features in it. So I don't know, probably not going to move anytime in the relatively near future. I do have a bit of a sense of dread of the economy in the next 6 to 12 months. And so I probably will stick with my current already embarrassment of riches technology-wise in my home. But I think it's an interesting piece. The question I was going to have for you, Wes, I know that the new mouse features have rolled out in iOS. Have you tried any of the new trackpad features on any of your iPads?
I have not, but I'm hugely interested in it, because this whole question about, for me, it's not as much I'm gonna give up a laptop, but it's that, like, what's the function I have when I'm iPad only, which
right
can sometimes be at conferences and things like that. So no, I haven't given that a try yet, but it's like Apple's opening the playbook to say, yeah, you can do that, because before it was like, oh, you can't plug in USB. Oh, you can't plug in a mouse. Oh, you can't, drive huge screens and stuff like that. And they're really making the answer, yes, you can, to a lot of those things. So haven't tried it yet, But, continuing to absolutely love my iPad as not only a consumption device, but a creation device.
Right.
It's the fastest way. I had a teacher the other night. She had accidentally recorded on her phone upside down for about 20 minutes, and she needed to flip that. Fast and I guess I could have done that in QuickTime, but it's so fast for me to do that stuff on my iPad. It was a 1.2, 1.3 gigabyte file, and so I threw it over onto my iPad and then used a little flipping app and flipped it over. There's several ways to do that kind of stuff, but anyway, creation on the iOS platform, and then also just the editing and things like that with iMovie, really, really fast, really, really slick and wonderful.
Hey, and I have to say that from a form factor standpoint, that keyboard is really expensive, but I love the look of that case and the keyboard with the trackpad in it, with the larger 12.9-inch iPad Pro. I am not in the market to spend $1,500 on that particular device, but my, is that tempting.
That is attractive, yes. So if for our Apple lovers out there, and I know Peggy's still out there, that is definitely something that I'm sure the folks at Apple. I mean, they make beautiful hardware. They make hardware that works on it, and it's beautiful as well. And I'm excited and appreciate the iPhone SE information, because we're still sporting a couple iPhone 6s, which aren't as ancient as many folks are still using hardware, but that is something that we need to look at individually. Is when am I going to upgrade? And what you mentioned about global supply chains and global market and things like that. Well, I don't think any of this is going to dry up, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens, because this is the long-term impact and ripple impacts of this in the economy. Apple's not going out of business, and they're not going to stop producing phones. I'm not saying that. But we need to be thinking about when we're doing upgrades, and what does that upgrade cycle look like, not only for your school, but also for your family. Peggy said she's sporting the iPhone 6 Plus as well. And, it's one of those things where, it's not going to become obsolete tomorrow. You get a lot of return on investment on a lot of hardware today, especially I think iOS and Mac hardware. But you do need to, I think you want to consider when you can get rid of it, so you can still get a good trade in. I think I was able to get about $250, $200 for an iPhone 7. I was having trouble actually with my speaker, and then I just opted to go to the iPhone 8 for a little while. I went to the 11 Pro, and then I gave that to our 16-year-old, who's really loved having that fantastic phone, and she's doing photography and anyway. But it was one of those things where I had to at that point, because what I didn't realize is how dependent I am on talking to my phone all the time to dictate text messages, to dictate emails, to be able to ask Siri to do things, to ask the Google Assistant. So when my speaker was going out and I was not able to effectively dictate, it was sort of like I'd had one of my arms cut off. Literally, it was bad. So we are a little bit past the top of the hour, but we did start a little bit late. My clock, or our clock there on StreamYard, says we've been going for 57 minutes and 24 seconds. I think we do have some Geeks of the Week. Do we want to hit any other articles, Dr. Neiffer, before we Geek of the Week it?
Well, I would note that if you are in the market for a Windows laptop, my preferred Windows laptop recommendation, I'm a big Lenovo guy. I think that if you are a nerd, especially, and you like to dig around your laptop, Lenovo's are pretty hard to beat. But for typical users that are looking for a medium to high-end laptop, the XPS 13 from Dell has been my recommendation for probably 3 or 4 years now. And there's a new model out every year. But The Verge has a great review of the new XPS 13, which was released a few weeks back, and it's a beautiful looking laptop. If you're looking for a more high-end experience, read that review. It looks like it's pretty great. How about you?
I think we hit most of the big ones that you put in a lot more this week than I had. So I guess I'll do one more quickly. This is an old one. I don't know how I missed this, but Workspaces, I was not using that in Google. So this is the 9 to 5 Google article back from August of 2019. Google Drive priority page and Workspaces rolling out to all G Suite editions. Just started to use it this week. And what Workspaces lets you do is take several different files in Google Drive that don't have to be in the same folder, but you use this priority icon that's at the top of your Google Drive, and then you have a workspace. So for instance, we're doing a lot with digital curriculum, and we've got different files in different places. So I've created a workspace called digital curriculum, and I basically got all of those files appearing there so that I can work on them readily. That's just a tool I had missed and had never tried. So
Yeah.
is it something that you're playing with and you've already been using?
Workspaces. I didn't. It's not that I didn't get it. I just didn't find a use for it until I suddenly did. And right now, I have a group of about 6 documents that I'm using every day, in part to work on things like messaging and data tracking in my program in light of the novel coronavirus. And so I am spending my time putting documents in that space and able to easily get to them. I think it's a great functionality, and it's another way that I think Google's doing a good job of trying to help you organize your information.
Definitely.
Okay, Geeks of the Week, sir. Why don't you get us started here?
All right. Well, I'm going to abuse my Geek of the Week power by sharing too many things. But downdetector.com will tell you if it's just you or if your service is down. It uses a variety of different indicators via social media and other things to be able to tell if a service, be that Netflix or your local, cable company or whatever, if it's down in your area. Shout out to the World Affairs, one of my favorite podcasts, which I'm continuing to try to use, and I am, the Google Podcast app and service. But this is a fantastic show from 6 days ago called Using a Pandemic to Consolidate Power. And it's talking about, across the globe in different places, the kinds of decisions and the kinds, like in Hungary, good grief, democracy is basically over there. The kinds of things that autocrats and in some cases elected leaders are doing to grab power. Just really fascinating. Jason and I, with our debate and political science and social studies backgrounds, are definitely enjoying those sorts of things. So if you haven't checked that one out, Jason, it's one to not miss. Google has a great website called Teach from Home. And just like other companies, and of course you think about this is the power of Google, they have created a hub of information and tools to help teachers during the COVID-19 crisis. One of the things, I've definitely seen a lot, as you probably have, like, hey, 250 tools and these, extensive lists. Well, the most valuable are the filtered lists, where a company or an individual or a group has filtered down the thousands of tools that are out there to say, hey, these are the ones that we really think are most powerful. And so that's a great resource. I just downloaded this app this week, and it is available for Android as well as iPhone. It's called Jumbo Privacy Plus Security. And what this does is you authorize it. And of course, I found this in a source I consider reputable, because you're clicking to allow those things like we were talking about with quizzes and stuff, but it looks at your settings and asks you questions and then encourages you to take a bit more of a conservative path as far as what you're going to allow Google to know and Facebook and these other things. And so I did ratchet some of my sharing back. I mean, I love YouTube and the fact that it knows my history and makes recommendations and I can discover stuff, via that history. But that's a good app that I've just started to play with. And I think it puts what's in front of you and I can go right now into our settings for privacy on these different platforms, but having an app, so to speak, to hold your hand through this and then make some recommendations to you, exceptionally helpful. And then finally, the last one is a website that I spun up this week based on our conversations in the show last week. And it's called Live Teaching Tools. It's on support.cassidy.org/teacher/live. And so whether you're doing interactive presentations, Desmos, Nearpod, Pear Deck, GoFormative, Socrative, OneNote, polling and quiz tools we talked about. I did record a tutorial on how to share your iPad screen with QuickTime Player. You have to have a Mac OS computer to do that, and other features. So a little too much for my Geeks of the Week, but, sometimes I get carried away. How about you, Dr. Neiffer?
Sometimes you're a little more geeky than I am, as it turns out. So, hey, the two things I want to share, these are both nerdy weekend projects that are worth your time to set up if you've got maybe a great or an extra nerdy setup at home. Gizmodo had a great article on April 13th called How to Turn Your Smartphone into a Webcam. And there are actually quite a few ways to do this. The one that I figured out on Monday night was that I took an older iPad I had and was able to download an app to that iPad that then works broadcast as a video source to my PC with a couple of different things you can download. And the reason why that's interesting to me is because the camera on my iPad, and I have an iPad Mini 2, it's a 6-year-old iPad, but the camera itself is way better than this thing here, which is my current webcam, and it's probably 10, 11, 12 years old, and wasn't really a high definition cam in the first place. But I have done some Zoom calls on it this week. I didn't want to rely on it for our thing tonight because we were broadcasting, but there are different ways to do that. So if you're interested, or I know that there is a nationwide webcam shortage right now. A lot of teacher friends that were moving at home that were trying to outfit a desktop with a webcam weren't able to successfully do that because they couldn't find a webcam that could be shipped to them because people have sold out webcams. So that is an interesting thing. And the other one, I used to do this at work, and I haven't done this lately, and I'm probably going to do it. I'm actually setting up a new office right now. I've taken over a guest bedroom in my home and moved from my former basement office, which was kind of in a stinky basement that was dark and not particularly pleasant to be in. I've moved to a guest bedroom, and I'm working on turning it into a more formal office. There are different ways that you can share a keyboard and mouse over different machines. And what I mean by that is, let's say, for example, you have a Mac and a PC. And I'm not talking about switching between the two. I'm talking about literally dragging your mouse from the PC screen over to the Mac screen and back and forth. And there are software ways you can do that. There's 2 or 3 programs that allow you to do so. Many of them are cross-platform, but I put a really great article that teaches you how to do that. It's from PC Magazine on April 13th, but basically how to control multiple computers with a single keyboard and mouse that each have their own monitor set up. So you're not switching between the two on your monitor, you're actually dragging a mouse back and forth between the two systems. So great weekend project if you are a nerd. But this here is not a weekend nerd project. This is the EdTech Situation Room. We are a once-a-week podcast that goes over tech news, shoots it through the educational lens, and tries to bring a little insight. You can join us on Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. Mountain, 9 p.m. Central Time, or I think sometime in the middle of the night if you happen to be joining in Western Europe. Wes, where can people find you when you're not broadcasting on the EdTech Situation Room?
Well, as our little bylines say at the bottom with our Twitter IDs, I'm W. Fryer on the Twitters. My blog, speedofcreativity.org, is usually getting a new post every week or so. And I'm continuing to build the instructional resources for our teachers, but they are openly licensed under Creative Commons on our Google site that is to be found at support.cassidy.org. How about you, Dr. Neiffer?
I am at Tech Savvy Teach on Twitter. I blog for the Northwest Council for Computer Education, blog.ncc.org. And I'm excited because I am, NCC on Thursdays has been running live events at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern on Thursday afternoons. And I think it's 2 weeks from now, I'm going to offer a 20-minute live event on working at home, how to work at home, a topic we covered a couple of weeks back here on the podcast. But the EdTech Situation Room is available on Stitcher. It's available on Spotify. It's available on podcasting apps across the universe. Wherever you're getting your podcast, you can find the EdTech Situation Room there. Or check out our YouTube channel, check out our Facebook page, go to edtechsr.com, download show notes, download every link we talk about, or even tiny little audio files to listen to us weekly. In the meantime, we hope you join us live next Wednesday. Otherwise, stay safe, stay savvy, and we hope to see you next time on the EdTech Situation Room. Good night.